January 11, 1947. Positive ideas in the work. Let me repeat again that we should not do anything negatively. Whatever you do or rather have to do not do it negatively. Last time this was spoken of, together with the subject of positive ideas and how man in general is kept at the notes do, re, me, over and over again. Real development is impossible because he does not possess sufficient positive ideas to jump and reach the note far and so approach the sphere of conscious man. Now it is obvious that if we do anything negatively we have not a positive idea connected with it. Looking at life, we find considerable reasons for having negative ideas about it. The most of literature is negative, the most of poetry is negative. History is a history of crime, and so on. How, it might be said, can we have positive ideas under such circumstances? Only by a new set of ideas, another range of ideas. Negative ideas have very great attractive power. A negative idea, such as that the universe is meaningless, can draw millions into its vortex and hold them as in prison. This takes away the chance of individual growth from them and so renders them subjects for more suggestion. This is the effect of negative ideas, namely, to destroy individual importance and meaning and inner individual thought and make a man dependent on the outside and so more and more under the power of external life. We here catch a glimpse of the meaning of negative ideas as distinguished from positive ideas. A positive idea puts a man less and less under the power of the outside, of external life. You remember that it is constantly repeated in the work that, as long as life is the third force, you cannot change. That is, this inner development, possible for man, which all esoteric teaching is about, cannot take place. The work says that unless a man has undergone his destined development he remains in the experiment of creating a self-developing organism on Earth, as distinct from the animals and plants, etc., that form the main bulk of organic life. Life, as third or neutralizing force, keeps outer personality active and inner essence passive. Yes, but one must begin to ponder for oneself as to what this means. The real man remains undeveloped by life. Only another force, coming from another direction and having another range of ideas, can bring about the lessening of the life-formed personality, with its craving for visible rewards, and lead to the stirring and awakening of the inner man, the essential man, the development of which is the object of esoteric teaching. Now, to interrupt the theme for a moment, what does esoteric mean? In the New Testament the outer man and the inner man are spoken of. The outer man is called the exoteric man, the inner man the esoteric man. What does this mean? The outer man, the personality, may be well trained and will never steal, let us say. But if all fear were removed, he would steal. But if the inner or esoteric man were developed, he would not steal, understanding why not. He becomes internally responsible, that is the difference. If the inner man were developed, no police would be necessary. Now, in us, life develops the outer man, but not the inner man. Esoteric teaching is therefore about the development of this inner, as yet undeveloped, essence, the esoteric man. Then, whatever happens in outer life, a man behaves rightly, from himself, internally. In the Greek, e means outer, and es means inner. Esotericism therefore is a teaching applying to the inner man, to what you are in yourself, apart from external restraints and fears. So the work starts with self-observation, that is, observing your inner states and what you are like. It does not start with external observation as does science. A man, or woman, in this work, must learn by self-observation that what they seem to be, what they pretend to be outwardly, is not what they are internally. Realizing this, they begin to suffer from the sense of contradiction. This is useful suffering. The outer and inner must conform eventually and become one unity. Man asleep takes himself for granted as a unity. When he begins to observe himself, he realizes he is two in the broadest sense, that is, what he pretends to be and what he is. Then he must eventually become a unity. Then outer and inner are the same. This is the first step. To be kind to a person outwardly and hate and murder him inwardly is the ordinary state of man asleep. In this psychological state nothing can change in a man. He is a failure in the experiment of self-development. Now to return to positive ideas. Unless, said Mr. Ouspensky, in so many words, man believes in greater mind, he is useless for the work. To believe in greater mind is to have a positive idea, and without positive ideas no one can develop. A man who thinks he is isolated, independent, that he knows and that he can do with his limited finite mind, with all its ignorance, starts from active do, and then describes a descending octave and so perishes. History is full of such examples. To think one can do is to start from a negative idea. To realize one cannot do and to study how to do, and what is necessary, is to start from a passive do, that is, to begin an ascending octave. Mr. Ouspensky used often to talk in this way. You might very well think that the idea that you can, for instance, reform the world, change other people, and so on is a positive idea. On the contrary, it is a negative idea. It is as negative an idea as if you were to think that you could, without any very special knowledge, operate on a man's brain. In this work, people who think they can do are called lunatics. Mr. Ouspensky once asked Mr. Gurdjieff what a man has to do to assimilate his teachings. What to do? Asked Mr. Gurdjieff, as though surprised. It is impossible to do anything. A man must first of all understand certain things. He has thousands of false ideas and false conceptions, chiefly about himself, and he must get rid of some of them before beginning to acquire anything new. Otherwise the new will be built on a wrong foundation and the result will be worse than before. How can we get rid of false ideas? Mr. Ouspensky asked. We depend on the forms of our perception. False ideas are produced by the forms of our perception. Mr. Gurdjieff shook his head. Again you speak of something different, he said. You speak of errors arising from perceptions, but I am not speaking of these. Within the limits of given perceptions man can be more or less deluded. As I have said before, man's chief delusion is his conviction that he can do. All people think that they can do, all people want to do, and the first question all people ask is what are they to do? But actually nobody does anything and nobody can do anything. This is the first thing that must be understood. Everything happens. All that befalls a man, all that is done by him, all that comes from him, all this happens, and it happens in exactly the same way as rain falls as a result of a change in the temperature of the atmosphere, as snow melts under the rays of the sun, as dust rises with the wind. Man is a machine. All his deeds, actions, words, thoughts, feelings, convictions, opinions and habits are the results of external influences, external impressions. Out of himself a man cannot produce a single thought, a single action. Everything he says, does, thinks, feels, all this happens. Man cannot discover anything, cannot invent anything. It all happens. January 4, 1947. Positive ideas in the work. It was said recently that one should not do anything negatively. In this age it might be said that in the world people tend, as a whole, to do things negatively. For example, factory workers do not, and indeed cannot, take pleasure in their work, that is, the emotional part of moving center is not used, so they have to have music and so on as a substitute. The moving center works infinitely better when the emotional part collaborates. Then a person takes pleasure in his movements, in the skill of his hands, etc. And he becomes a craftsman through the guidance of the emotional part, that is, of emotional cognition. We spend a great deal of our time in being negative and doing things negatively without noticing it. The difference is between going to, or being dragged to, something. If you go to a thing from yourself you work at it positively. Otherwise it works you, and that is one form of doing things negatively. One source of this is when we doubt. The work is always tempting us and so making us negative. Temptation is when we doubt the end. It is easy to give up, to think things useless, that is, to think negatively. One has to say to oneself, I can work, and say it further and further inside oneself. People do not recognize it as temptation. Here is an example in a letter on the subject. I have noticed that temptation can be met if it is recognized as temptation. I had an example last night. I was about to fall into a well-known slough of despond, doubting the end, and then it suddenly struck me that it might be temptation and that perhaps it was not inevitable and that perhaps one need not go into it, if one had some help. In the end I went to sleep quite peacefully. We must live with a plan, noticing ourselves in regard to it. If there is no aim, no plan, no individual direction, there is nothing to notice, nothing to work on. We remain where we were, for then we do not act consciously in our relation to our inner world and what we allow to go on in it, and in relation to the world of others who are mirrors to us. Self-remembering increases the force of consciousness. The act of self-remembering, as, for example, remembering distinctly one's plan, one's aim, in the midst of some difficult situation, actually creates new energy. It is like the light becoming much brighter, as if the central station had increased the current. And this is just what it is. We get connected up inside again, and the work then can give us force. Falling asleep, letting smoldering negative states grow unchecked, breaks up right connections. The whole plan and system of the work is simply to give right inner connections so that force from higher centers can be received. The act of self-remembering, in a full sense, includes all the work, all its teaching and new ways of thinking, all one has learned from it, all that one has gained from it, all that it means, all the insights, all the new experiences, all this together. Then right connections open up again and new force passes through one. What does this force do? It overcomes the negative mess of life, which people are always accumulating, which forms wrong connections. It increases consciousness, which is light. Through this light one sees everything more clearly, just as if you turn on the light in a room in which you have been blundering about and knocking everything down in the dark. Yes, self-remembering gives new light. This light is consciousness, increase of consciousness. The work is to increase consciousness. Now to have more consciousness requires our not going to sleep inside, for that is to invite and encourage darkness. Going to sleep means not doing anything in any of the three lines of work. You neither work on yourself and your personal ambitions and desires, nor with others, and on the mechanical contempts and dislikes of them, nor do you value the work itself and keep its ancient worth alive, between your two hands, as a delicate thing. Do you expect this ancient work to give you straightway the highest consciousness and understanding? That would be trivial, and would point to a tedious level of being. The work means work in a work, many inner and outer readjustments, many self-realizations and slow difficult periods during which you will work, as a small guarded plant, between your two hands, and keep your eyes on it enough. That means your attention and the two hands mean inner and outer consciousness, consciousness of yourself and consciousness of others. This plant begins to die if you do not look at it enough. G compared it with an egg hatching out that you must not allow to get too cold. One ancient teaching says, not more than 8 hours. Well, it is something like that. For people who only think of this ancient work once every week at meetings, everything has to be taught again. They do nothing themselves in the first, second or third lines of work. They have no internal heat, no esoteric faith, only live faith. They expect to be warmed up by others. This is a poor state of being and understanding. What, said Mr. Ouspensky once, have you done since the last meeting? What have you seen? What have you understood? What have you noticed? Silence was the answer. Now we know that, as long as a person is himself and delighted with himself, as long as he takes himself as himself and is satisfied, as long as he cannot by self-observation begin to separate himself from what he has up to. Now taken as himself, he cannot change his being. He will be as he has been, that is, his being will remain the same. Now to change being, it is necessary to have positive ideas. Let us speak of this. It was once said by Mr. Ouspensky, the state of humanity can be compared with the following octave. Mr. Ouspensky said, mechanical man can be compared with the notes do, re, mi. He cannot get to the notes fa, sol, la, si, do. For what reason? Because mechanical humanity has not got positive ideas. Only positive ideas can make mankind pass the place of vacuum, of nothingness, the place where collectivism, crowds, medals, examinations, are no good at all. What makes a man want to go on? He wants to rival someone else. Mechanical men cannot get beyond this, because life as third force cannot get them beyond this. You have to pass the place where life things are no good. Probably it is impossible on this planet for humanity to reach this stage. Only individuals may reach it. The work is a special forcing house to produce in people positive ideas without which they cannot pass from me to far. To change being, to grow, to fulfill oneself, a certain inner positive pressure of attention is necessary. One must have positive ideas. One must wish to change. This has two sides. One understands from the work that one's life on earth means that one has something quite definite to do or else one would not be here. That is a positive idea. The other side is that one finds in oneself many undesirable things that one is vaguely aware of and sometimes uncomfortable about. This side must become a positive idea and not a negative one. It is easy to find fault with oneself in a certain way. This is a negative idea. Through right self-observation one sees what one has to alter. Then the negative idea becomes a positive idea. No one can change through negative ideas through vague self-accusations, for example, or through a certain kind of miserableness. All this is negative. Do not listen to miserable, I would love to drag you down. There is much in everyone, said G, that seeks to destroy him. Further, it must be understood that as long as a man thinks he can do, he is acting from a negative idea. His third force is life. Now it is necessary to wake up and feel the shock of the work teaching and see that the cause of all negative emotions and states is in you. It is useless to look at the outer cause of them. You must separate from them. And also recollect that negative states create only negative states in ourselves and in others. Try not to speak to people as if they could do, without seeing if you can do what you blame them for not doing. In that case, show them how to do it themselves. To be negative and blame another is to start from a negative idea. To see that one must work on oneself as regards negative emotion and stop identifying with it is a positive idea. Other people cannot do any more than you can. So try to stop speaking of them and criticizing them as if they could. Other people may be able to understand if you understand and can teach them from your own understanding. Do not live in a frozen world of thinking that others should be different. This is the ordinary life situation here. Accept your situation intelligently and remember others are mirrors of yourself. Do not think what you see in others cannot possibly be in you. God is what you need. Begin with your neighbor. He shows you what you need, that is, what you need to see in yourself and become conscious of. We all need to become more conscious. All work requires force. People have not enough force because they have not distinct positive ideas about the work and what they are doing and what it means in life. The more you feel the work, the more force of consciousness is possible for you, that is, consciousness above that required for serving life, serving nature. Everyone can become more conscious, that is, have more force. But this is only possible by following all this ancient work teaches. One must work for it, pay for it. If you prefer sleep, sleep. If you wish to awaken, work. January 18, 1947. Further note on positive ideas in the work and reversal of signs. A positive idea may be tentatively defined, in these commentaries, as an idea that lessens personality and increases essence. It was said last time that the idea that man can do is not a positive idea, although most people would say it was. But the idea that man can do increases personality. It is exactly what personality thinks. The work says, man cannot do. And this is a positive idea. Why? Because it lessens personality, whereas the idea that man can do increases personality, and therefore is a negative idea. Personality has no life of itself. Only what has life of itself can do. For example, we have no ideas of our own. All roles and combinations of I form personality, all records on roles made from impressions, all buffers, attitudes, pictures, all this makes up the machine of personality. With this absurd machine we move about, believing ourselves. Yet we cannot think a new thought. We can only compare, copy, alter. This machine, which is dead, surrounds essence which is alive, but inarticulate, undeveloped. A man with developed essence, a man who has undergone this reversal of signs, personality active and essence passive to personality passive and essence active, such a man belongs to conscious humanity and such a man can do. He is reborn. Such a man has real fate, for fate is of essence, and mechanical law belongs to machines, that is, to us. Ordinary man is under accident, not fate. Now we realize what is meant by the positive idea man cannot do, when we begin to become conscious of our own mechanicalness. A machine does not do. It has no choice. This is one of the definite increases of consciousness possible for us and expected after a certain time. Time is measured in the work. This work is about increasing consciousness in many definite directions. Consciousness is like not physical light, but psychological light, which gives a new power of seeing everything. As man is, he is in darkness quite literally. He is in psychological darkness. He is not conscious. To begin to realize that one is mechanical and not really alive is a shock. This shock belongs to the zone which in the three-story factory, fed by impressions, air and food, is called the region of the first conscious shock. This shock a man can give himself. Here he can do. Man can work with the help of the work. But first he must form observing I, the result of this work and of the ideas taught by it. The more you see the strength of the work, the more you can observe. Only through the observing IRMED by this work and its positive ideas can a man observe himself deeply enough to realize his mechanicalness as a psychological fact. He then sees that the whole matter and meaning of life lies in himself and his relation to himself. Hitherto he has been identified with what is not him, with personality, and so not with his fate. Now he begins to separate. In short, he begins to awaken from sleep, from personality active. So the realization that he is a machine and that he cannot do has a positive result, although it seems a negative idea. It brings him a step toward that reversal, that interchange of signs between personality and essence. For we have tentatively defined a positive idea as that which lessens personality and increases essence. So let us again refer to the great diagram, the condensed formulation of what is necessary if we wish this work and no longer believe in life as an end in itself. One can see without difficulty that a reversal is necessary for a man to be reborn, or reach his inherently possible development. For according to the work, everyone is born a self-developing organism, that is, capable of a further step, individually, in his evolution. But for life purposes, that is to serve nature, this is not necessary. Man asleep serves nature. The side octave from the sun, that is, from that internal psychological level represented physically and externally by the natural and quite dramatic sun, has sown man on earth to contribute to the pain factory of organic life, but has given man the inherent possibility of raising his level of being in such a way that although he, as a body, is on the earth, psychologically he is at a higher level. The psychological man, that is at a higher level. As you know, a man is first his body and then his psychological body. The work is always making the second psychological body, and for this new ideas and the practice of them are necessary. Now all the ideas of the work are positive in exactly this sense, namely, if followed they lead to the formation of a psychological body. As man is, from the action of external life, he has no organized psychological body. His level of being and his knowledge are such that internally, psychologically, he is legion, a mass of contradictory multiplicity in fact. A machine run by external life, a machine which is a function of the outside and has no inner life of its own. All this cannot be pondered on enough. You have heard it, but not seen it. You have listened to it but not found secretly what it means. I will only act it if you value the work and do not nibble at it. If you feel it emotionally, you will very soon know what the third force of life is and what the third force of the work is. That is, you will get to know practically what it is to be mechanical and what it is to begin to behave consciously. When you know this is a psychological fact for yourselves, then you will know when you are behaving as a man or woman, asleep, and when you are behaving as a man or woman, beginning to awaken from the general sleep of humanity. And so you'll begin to see what this reversal of signs implies and understand practically what this ancient idea of being reborn means. January 25, 1947, Magnetic Center and Positive Ideas. It has been often said in the teaching of this work that one of the signs of being in a person is the possession of magnetic center, which signifies the power of seeing things on different levels. A sense of scale in regard to the meaning of magnetic center has nothing to do with a mechanical sense of scale. For example, an emotional type, for instance, an artist has a sense of scale about art and usually a very jealous one. Or an intellectual man, a number 3, has a sense of scale about intellectual things and again is very jealous. But this is not the scale that magnetic center gives, which is a scale outside life. For example, let us take a number 1 who judges everything from the viewpoint of physical prowess. He meets a number 2 who is, say, an artist. He feels nothing from this artist because he has no sense of scale. He cannot understand that this artist, who perhaps contributes to the culture of life, is superior to him because he judges him from his physical power, and so on. That is, he sees nothing higher than himself except invisible people who are taller or shorter or more powerful than himself. So he derives his feeling of scale from the physical senses. Magnetic center, however, means the power of seeing beyond our mechanical fixations. It means the power of seeing that there is something far higher than oneself, whether one is number 1, number 2, number 3. Speaking in general, a man who possesses magnetic center is at a higher level than one who does not because he can see higher and lower. There are, however, different qualities of magnetic center. Sometimes people have what Mr. Ouspensky called false magnetic center, and sometimes they have multiple magnetic center, that is, they have many small, weak magnetic centers. As a result, they run after every variety of magical and pseudo-occult practice, every kind of mystical cult, or even join end-of-the-world societies, or spend their time in measuring dark passages in the pyramids and explaining everything by them. Such people have no right sense of scale. Right magnetic center does not lead in this direction. But both in a man with wrong or false magnetic center and a man with right magnetic center, there is the belief that there is something else, another idea of life, and that life cannot be explained in terms of itself. This is a positive idea. Now man, being created a self-developing organism, as the work says, cannot fulfill himself unless he finds out how to develop. He may feel he cannot explain the universe, or that he cannot explain himself, or both. In any case, the sense of mystery enters. This feeling, this continual awareness of the inexplicability of everything, is one of the signs of right magnetic center. Curiosity, ambition to be great, the excitings of so-called occult knowledge and the belief that one can get something for nothing have to do with small I and with the self-emotions. But the sense of mystery goes beyond all self-love. It decreases personality. It makes a man feel his nothingness. So it connects him with positive ideas, for anything that renders personality more passive and essence more active has connection with positive ideas. For this reason God, as absolute, is a positive idea. The ray of creation is a positive idea. The conscious circle of humanity is a positive idea. The idea that we are all asleep and must awaken is a positive idea. Let us recall once more the teaching of the work about magnetic center. It says that magnetic center brings us into the work but cannot keep us there without our own efforts. We have to work on ourselves and in contact with the system that tells us how we have to work. We have to will this work. To attempt to do this work, such as the practicing of non-identifying without willing the work, cannot give any result. Will starts from affection. Will, if you come to think of it, is love. One emotion can overcome another if strong enough. The center of gravity of will lies in the emotional center. It is worth reflecting on this oneself. But although a man may have right magnetic center, which should lie in the intellectual part of the emotional center, it is only introductory. If he is led to a teaching connected with the conscious circle of humanity by means of it, his task is only begun. He has to turn his sense of mystery, his seeking, his cravings, his lab, into something real, into practical and practiced work, and the more he values emotionally, the more he is given help. If he has the strength to catch the rope overhead, then not only is he working, but the work works on him. It begins to teach him, in periods of silence, in those gaps in one's mechanical life when usually everything is a blank or boredom. Above all, it enters when one has separated, that is, not identified with. One of the 101 daily things that keep us asleep and seem so great through identifying, which is an enormous magnifying lens. People like to make a problem of everything, to be worried, and, like flies, get stuck on every little flypaper event. One may have no idea how it is possible to avoid these fly papers, that is, unless one takes the work simply and applies it simply, almost at every moment. What an unrolling of care can then take place, and how these things adjust themselves and fall into their right place. Diagram of magnetic center. Some people do not distinguish the difference between A and B influences. They take everything in life in the same way and on the same level. Others recognize B influences and are affected by them, and a few even make an effort to find out more. This is due to the quality of magnetic center. They seek. Only a few seek from themselves. Memory, due to recurrence, may make magnetic center very strong from earliest times. In a sense, contact with the work may create magnetic center in those who seem not to possess it. If so, in recurrence, they will recognize the work when they hear it again, for everything repeats, everything returns, in the circle of one's life. However, the work simply says that magnetic center is acquired and is due to the early influences a child has been under. Today it is ceasing to exist, that is, the level of humanity is dropping. Positive ideas, in the work meaning, are being replaced by negative ideas. As a consequence, all those higher parts of centers that we are furnished with just because we are self-developing organisms are not made contact with, not used, not given food. Man more and more is living in the basement, not merely literally, and in consequence change of being is being made impossible, for only positive ideas can change being. Since change of being, that is, self-development, is the real idea of man by his creation, his individual meaning is being lost. If we change being, even a little, as not disliking so easily, not identifying with every worry, our life alters. Unless we change being, the taste of our life and our actual life situations remain nearly the same. Without positive ideas, that is, without contact with C influences via B influences, all the real meaning of man perishes. He is cut off from influences that could change him, so he becomes wholly under the power of A influences. He then serves life and the big machines of life: politics, trade, war, mass exercise, mass propaganda, etc. He will not possess magnetic center. He will not seek positive ideas. His inner mind is shut. His inner life dies, and, esoterically speaking, he becomes useless, meaningless, dead. Much was said in the Gospels about the quick and the dead, and many warnings were given about man being cut off, which can be understood far more distinctly from the work ideas. On the other hand, a culture comes to an end and has to be destroyed, and the flood comes, namely, barbarism, violence, loss of truth. Then an ark is made to survive the flood and keep alive knowledge for the next culture. What do you think of this time in the light of these ideas?